Hi, my name is Amanda Panacea, and you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This is a community for self-healers, biohackers, practitioners, and any other helping professionals. You're in the right place if you're seeking conversations about how pain becomes passion, the connection between physical, energetic, mental, and our spiritual self, finding your body's ancient wisdom, the latest biohacking technologies, clinical research, and if you just want to nerd out about complex biochemistry and quantum physics. But this is also for entrepreneurs who seek infinite abundance and a supportive community. So pour a cup of King coffee or Sisters tea and let's join the revolution. Hello and welcome to the Healer Revolution podcast. Today's guest, Blaise Kennedy, is a spiritual teacher, a guide, and the creator of Developmental Architecture, which is a framework that integrates consciousness work, nervous system regulation, emotional development, embodiment, trauma repair, and relational maturity into one developmental process. Blaise's work is deeply focused on helping people bridge the gap between awareness and actual lived transformation. Rather than chasing peak experiences or using spirituality to bypass unresolved wounds, he emphasizes the importance of nervous system capacity, relational safety, embodiment, honesty, and integration as the foundation for subtle healing and growth. And this is really why I appreciated this conversation, because one of the biggest shifts in my own healing was realizing that I could not bypass my humanity. I could not manifest my way out of nervous system dysregulation, attachment wounds, fear, shame, especially. And even as a licensed therapist and somebody who had been deep into psychology and counseling and psychotherapy and all sorts of these theories, I still kind of fell victim to those manifestation techniques, which really just led me to feeling more disconnected from myself and more shame. And what I appreciate also about Blaise's work is how grounded and integrated it feels. He really has a deep understanding of the connection between all things spirituality, relationships, nervous system, and the actual human experience in a way that feels both practical and sustainable. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and today I'm really excited to be able to sit down and have a really fun conversation with the spiritual teacher, Blaise Kennedy. Hi, Blaise. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your background. How did you step into this role as spiritual teacher and start to teach and be interested in consciousness?
Well, I started the hard way. I mean, if you want to tell the story from the beginning of my life, I started the hard way. I didn't know anything about consciousness or healing or um, looking at myself in any way. I had a lot of problems. And when I was about 24 years old, I couldn't live that way anymore. I got sent to a treatment center for addiction. And I was introduced the idea basically of self-reflection, honesty, sharing, and it was the first time in my life that I I found my thing. I really figured out what interested me and motivated me. So out of the ashes, so to speak, came a really clear direction. And again, when you really suffer in life and you're a recovering drug addict, you're starting at the bottom. So between now and then, it's just a lot of work, a lot of continuous work. Because I knew when I was about 24 that this is what I was going to do, but there was just so much work to be done. So I just got to it, and about 6 years ago, I started teaching formally, and that started a whole new journey because you have to learn about teaching, and that's my great joy is being a teacher and learning through the process of working with people.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. My biggest growth has been stepping into that teacher space or leadership space. Whereas before it was very comfortable to just be a student and constantly learning and never actually like taking action into that role or that embodiment piece. And so I'd love to hear your experience. Like, what would you say the phases of going from like I'm in recovery and kind of understanding myself and learning a lot until you decided, like, okay, my next step is to be maybe a teacher or start to work with larger groups of people?
Yeah, so when I was in recovery, they gave me a pretty basic pitch, which is like you need to do this, you're gonna die. And I
Hmm.
didn't think I was gonna die. I was pretty sure that I was on my way to success, but I stayed around in recovery for about 2 years. I
Hmm.
did the steps thoroughly and I had sponsors. And at some point I felt like I was ready for the next thing. I kind of outgrew that. And I've got very seriously into meditation. And in my experience, recovery doesn't really advocate for presence or mindfulness or self-inquiry or spiritual practice in that same way. And so I was really eager to do something else. And right when I was ready, I met two teachers who emphasized different things. One was more focused on healing. His name is Thomas Hubel. The other was more focused on awakening in the pure sense. That's Adi Ashanti. And I was just really, really well on my way. I had a very big, fancy, flashy spiritual awakening very soon after that. And then it was very clear that this kind of process was taking over my life, this thing that I couldn't really, nobody else in my life could relate to. And basically, I just realized, well, I'm going to see this through. It's going to take me however long it takes me in 10 years, whatever it is. And everything up until then is professional development and personal development. So I did. I just as you're saying, I was a very happy student. In some ways, being a student is like you just do the right thing and there's a safety in that. And I'd never had that in my life before. I had not been a good student of any kind. I was really, really comfortable as a student. I loved it. And when I started teaching, I didn't have any mentorship really. I had a very small amount of mentorship, and I realized I was quite exposed and alone. I was really shocked to find out that even though I'd been through so much and it had so much happen, and you could say I knew a lot, I didn't actually know what I was going to teach. And it was very uncomfortable to be like, how do I bridge this between being an authority and being a teacher and this awakened authority figure and someone who's still in a process and is still healing and still it's continuously still really a student. And that was kind of uncomfortable. But I settled into it, and I got really fortunate that for where I was, people wanted to work with me, and so I was just so grateful to have people to work with. And then what I realized is, oh, I'm actually learning. I This is like starting the beginning. Instead of being having to present myself as a finished product, I was just really honest with people. Like I'm learning, and I had enough development and capacity that people benefited from it and came back. I had a core group of people that worked with me for years and ran retreats. And then within the last year, especially, I have really figured out what it is that's my approach, what my unique offering is. But that I would really emphasize, it doesn't just come out of my experience of being me. It comes out of my experience of being in a relationship with you, of everybody. I learn by feeling and relating to my world. So my teaching is an expression of really everything I've done in my life, but also what I see in the people that I relate to. And I'm, I every year what I do feels radically improved from the year before, and I really don't expect that to stop.
Yeah. Yeah, I very much can relate to this as well. When I first finished my second master's program, so I did my master's in therapy or counseling, and then I was practicing and I became a licensed therapist. And then I did another master's in human nutrition and functional medicine, kind of still searching, still learning. And I was like, when I get done with this, I'll just start teaching. And I had never worked, I was a licensed therapist, but I didn't work one-on-one with people for those years. I worked in hospital settings and with insurance. And when I got done and I went to go try and teach, it was like, oh no, I can't bypass working with people and being in relationship to people and learning from them and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And it took quite a few years before I was like, oh, that now I'm refining like what my process is and how I work with people. You can't get that from just learning from books or even from other people. You have to do that. You have to kind of take those steps to get there.
Yeah, I am completely agree. And for me, it was slightly uncomfortable at first. Nobody told me to do that.
Hmm.
I had to figure it out myself. But now it's like the greatest joy of my life. And I shout it from the rooftops. Like every single person that comes to me, this is what I've realized is that I can't teach my path. I can't teach what happened to me. I have to teach what is happening to you. How do I
Hmm.
know what's happening to you? Well, I actually have to look and listen. And every single person that I meet expands my understanding of what is happening to us. And so it's my great joy. I'm so proud to say like that it's actually through relationship, it's through taking in what life is like for you that I get better at what I'm doing and I have more to offer. And I'm soliciting that. Like I'm always just so grateful for the people who come to me because you know it expands my world.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about your formula for transformation, or what does like spiritual transformation mean to you?
Well, so if you'd asked me this 5 years ago, I would have given you a very simple formula, and that worked. But through working with people, I realized there's actually a number of things that I wanted to focus on. This also mirrors my own path. There's a number of things that I wanted to learn, and I found that I was bouncing between different kinds of teachers and modalities to get a more holistic vision. I wanted to know about enlightenment. I wanted to know about healing from trauma. I wanted to know about manifestation. But what I found is most people taught about one of those facets. They didn't
Hmm.
they didn't have a comprehensive system, or there were at least boundaries to what they knew about and what they taught about. And my goal has been to create the most full, rich thing that I can teach because all of those things are important to me. To simplify that, uh, the nature of reality is important. Your ability to access the higher dimensions of reality is important, of consciousness is important. Your ability to heal and embody what has happened to you in this life and what has happened to your ancestors, what's happening in our world is important. And your ability to direct your intelligence, your capacity into service is also important. So what this means is you can't stake your well-being on one part of life. To make it even simpler, like we all know if you're really wealthy, but your health sucks, well, you're not going to be very happy. So we know this about life in general. It's holistic, but it's very much true in spirituality as well. So the question is, where do you start? And
Hmm.
I made a decision a long time ago that I don't teach individuals in the classical sense. I teach and create collective fields, which means I teach people, I take groups of people together through all of these different aspects. And so the first step is actually to teach us our common human language. And what that means is to be able to feel my life and communicate that to you, and conversely, to be able to feel your life and receive that. We need to be able to actually communicate. And that's not just at the mental level. In fact, so much gets missed, both in what I'm aware of and what you feel when we communicate only mentally. So I teach people to begin with by unifying our body and our mind. Very simply, we unify our body and our mind. So this means, I'll give you an example of how we don't do that. And that's most of the time when you see your neighbor outside and your neighbor says, "How are you this morning?" And you say, "I'm great." And what's missing? That's a nice answer. What's missing is all of the information about what's actually happening for you today, whether you're tired, whether the feelings that you have are present. There's so much information missing from the way that we communicate. And so I teach people how to communicate in a much more full way. And the fancy sort of technical way to describe this is I teach people access the fifth dimension, or the subtle, pervasive field of energy which pervades our life. So our nervous system is our personal energy field. It's our access point to our own personal energy field. So when I feel my feelings and when I feel my sensations, I'm beginning to become aware of energy as a principle. And over time, what you realize is that energy is not separate. It's not confined to the boundaries of you. It is by its nature shared and relational. And so we learn how to plug into that. That's the first thing that I do with people. And then from there, I think you asked me like, what is my formula for healing or for well-being? It's that everything is in a state of presence, which means like you could think about it in our metaphor. Everything is online. Everything is alive. So what trauma is a basic principle, is fragmented, stored energy that's not part of life. So one of the best descriptions of this is trauma is we don't actually feel our trauma. We feel the symptoms of our trauma. So we have to learn how to actually access energy and material and content that has been hidden from us, that we no longer feel. And so health as a general principle is the reintegration of more of life into one living experience. That's true for the person. So when I learn to, be able to think and feel my heart and feel my will and hold my ground, right? I'm becoming a more integrated person. That would be one example. It's also true relationally when you and I, and when our relationship includes more of our living history. It's true for the world as a whole. So I guess my basic model is towards the fullness and integration of life. So there are many spiritual teachers who don't emphasize that. They emphasize witnessing or transcending life. But I'm a get in there and feel everything kind of guy. And that'd be my start to the answer. Is I invite people to integrate and create the most full field of presence that they can, because I think that is essentially what makes consciousness work well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is exactly where I start with people is the somatic felt sense of what's going on. And we really can't get to like trauma work or leaning into big, giant decisions about your life if you have a hard time with feeling what's just neutral or what's there at any given moment of the day. So I kind of teach it in a very similar way where it's like, okay, what's sensation is there? Is it hot? Is it cold? Very foundational somatic therapies. Is there an emotion there? Nope. Numbness. Okay, how big is the numbness? And just really invite people to try and understand how their thoughts, their sensations, their body posture, their history, how all of it is like just one big jumbled experience of being a human, and have them feel less overwhelmed by just experiencing it so that then they have capacity for other things, for bigger things, and things that they might have been able to not handle in the past.
Absolutely. It's very, very much aligned with what I'm saying. And
Mm,
I'll build on that. I'll add two things. Is the first that uh, I really emphasize the fact that it's relational. Like all of that material, that jumbled up life, everything that's ever happened to you is actually present now between you and I. So when we live in a physical world, we tend to think about the past as being gone. And I'm a prime example of this. Before I was 24, I really had no understanding of how the past was impacting my present moment. And what I
mhm.
came to realize progressively, and what now dominates my life, is the past is always here. And it's either in a state of well being or it's just in some state of low vibration, to simplify. And all of this is showing up between you and I now. So my job is to help people not only direct themselves to themselves, but to really emphasize that it's happening between you and I right now. When I sit here, my whole life is in relationship with everything that's ever happened to you. And to really lean into the fact that it's by nature relational. So my anger and my sadness and the things that have happened to me and my joy, they're not meant to be actually kept to myself. They're my they're my they're my gift to life. They're my expression of life. And they're meant to actually be shared. And that's why you will find, I'm assuming this is true for you, that when you ask clients these questions, they're much more able to hold their attention on themselves and answer your questions and get information than they would do if they weren't with you. If they were just off by themselves, being like, I wonder how I feel right now, they wouldn't get the same results as when they're sitting with you. And the reason is because we actually come to life when we're in connection. And I believe the reason we come to life when we're in connection is because that's actually what our body is for. It's the same reason that my phone, you could say, comes to life when it's on the internet. If my phone is not connected to the internet, there's really no purpose for most of what's on my phone. It's through the internet that all of the apps and features and information on my phone come to life. And that's for me what it is like is the relational plane, or what I call the fifth dimension, is where we use most of the things that we're working on. So I emphasize let's use them for what they're designed to do, which is to create connection and to feel through. And there's something else I want to say, but I'm going to pause and I'll wait.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure. I'm just thinking about how, like, most of the women that I work with, mostly women, but definitely some men, are very shut down and like have a hard time with finding some of these just really simple sensations, emotions, or they don't remember anything from their past.
yeah.
And so it can be hard, especially when they're very like intellectualizing everything and they have a lot of awareness, they've done a lot of programs and they've learned a lot. But that body piece and that like felt sense and safe, be feeling safe in relation to someone else and being able to be vulnerable can be really hard like to overcome, I think, for a lot of the people that I work with. It takes a lot of practice.
It takes a lot of practice. And if you think about it from the other direction, why is it that we have things to work on in the first place? Why is it that we have
Attachment.
stored pain, negative self-image, sensitivities that aren't stabilized or healthy in us? Why is that? It's all a product of what life has been like for us, which is relational in nature, how it has been for us to incarnate into a world that's essentially traumatized. All of our pain is actually a product of the relational conditions on this planet. And
Mhm.
we often don't notice that, or we de-emphasize that because we experience a lot of separation. When we're traumatized, we feel separate. Progressively, as we heal, we feel actually much more part of life. We realize that both our gifts and our challenges are much less personal. They're more a product of this kind of living field of interrelatedness that is consciousness. So it's often, of course, people are not so aware of that as the world is, and that's our job, right? Our job is to create a space that is safe and responsive, so that people can come to life and come online. Those are the things you say. Where do I start? I start by
Mhm.
creating safety for people, and
Yeah.
people would say, "Well, I feel safe." It's like, well, relational safety actually requires that we're here together and that I'm attuned to you. Those are the foundations. And it's very, very infrequently, in my experience of the world that we live in, that those conditions are met.
Oh yeah. I ask every single one of my clients, could you go to your mother and father when you had an emotional problem and you wanted soothed? And everyone laughs. No way. No, no way. So we didn't get any of that emotional attunement. We don't know what that looks like or feels like, and we don't even know half the time that we even want it. Right? So I think that that's what the beauty of working with someone in a container like this is immediately, like you've said, it's like, oh, suddenly I can tell you things that I would have never even told my mother or my father ever in my life.
And yeah, I'll build on that and say things arise for me that I was not aware of. Like
Hmm.
safety and connection is the space that allows more content to arise for me. So a lot of meditation and spiritual teachers in general will really emphasize meditation. I've spent infinite amount of time meditating, But and so I think it's wonderful. But the idea is like if you just sit around quietly enough, all this material is going to come up and you'll work through it and you'll have this big breakthrough. And that does happen. But what I have found is if you want things to arise and you want movement and you want change to occur for you, the most valuable thing that you can have is safety. Because the truth is that your body doesn't actually want to be traumatized. It doesn't want to store pain. For me, what's really missing are the relational conditions for your body to move into a healing process. Your body is waiting for someone to be there. As soon as someone's there, progressively, it can't wait to tell its story. Your body wants you to be healthy. It wants to make good decisions. It's waiting until the conditions are right. So I really emphasize that if we put those conditions there, we will watch the body will do something different than you did growing up. It will do something different than what you're used to because it's responding to an opportunity. And for me, again, I emphasize creating that opportunity for people is much more important than teaching them how to work on themselves, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I like to let people know that we're having a corrective experience here. Like our relationship is to help with correcting the attunement that you didn't get and to have that safety that you may not have in any other relationships. And that's why it's so healing because now your nervous system is like, oh, it is safe to talk about these things. It is safe to open up, to be vulnerable, where that
Yeah,
might not have been safe before.
exactly.
Yeah. So let's go back to meditation because I have never been a meditator. I've never liked it. I've never been called to it. I've tried it a million times
Yeah.
and I just eventually have given up. I mean, when I was at my sickest, like housebound, disabled, I tried so hard to meditate and I just never felt like it was working for me. Do people have to meditate or is this like a whole nother avenue of like, yeah, if you like it, it's very beneficial. Or yeah, go deeper into
Well, I'm
meditation.
not in the business of telling people that they have to do anything.
Yeah.
I um, let's start by defining what meditation is,
Yeah.
perhaps. So there's many techniques, there's many things you can focus on, but the
Hmm.
basic universal principle is that you are present. And my goal in life is not that we create 8 billion hermetic yogi meditators, but actually the experience of being present, the experience of like really being with what is happening, uh, lands in every facet of our world. So I'm much more interested in that what we could call a meditative state or a meditative way colliding with the fullness of our life than I am in creating a bunch of hermetic cave dwelling meditators or monks. With that said, uh, meditation is extremely powerful, but I spend a lot of time teaching people how to do practices very similar to what you're talking about that are meditative in nature. Like if I'm sitting here with you, telling you about how I feel, if I'm sharing, oh, there's a whatever, an emotion in my heart, and I notice I take a deep breath, and you do the same thing. We are meditating. It's not taking the form necessarily of silence. It's not taking the form of me having my eyes closed, but I'm being present to life. And for
Hmm.
me, awakening is essentially about being present to life. As I would not tell people what form that needs to take. I would say that having practices where you slow down, sink into your experience, and you are deeply absorbed in the experience of being present is necessary. Our moment of life, like you can say, oh, well, I'll be mindful when I go to the shopping mall. I'll be mindful while I, do whatever I do. Our base rate, both culturally and in our body, is too fast because we live in a world that has created this strange rhythm that we all live in. And so, whatever the practice is, whatever the time period that it is that has them sort of enter a spacious, timeless, slow space, this is what really opens the door to presence. So, I would say, wherever you can get that, great. It just so happens that meditation, like what I mean by that, sitting with your eyes closed for an hour, is a very deep and continuous experience of that. And going on a meditation retreat for 10 days is a huge dose of that. So, I think that is an essential experience, and how you get it is probably very deeply personal.
Yeah, that's kind of how I live my life now. I mean, not 10 years ago, but I really am kind of obsessed with how can I be more present as I'm living my life instead of I have to take 20 minutes to pause and to go into this meditative state and to have no thoughts or to listen to this audio file. Because I had a lot of resistance to doing that. So it would never get done. So I was like, how can I bring that into how I'm living already instead of if I don't do this, then I've failed. If I can't meditate exactly this way, then it's not worth it. And because I was feeling so much shame about not doing this one thing in this one way, I was like, okay, well, how can I incorporate that into other ways? And I find a lot of women I work with are very similar. And so they hesitate to working with someone because they're like, I'm so busy. I can't do a program for an hour a day. I can't listen to audio files. I've got a baby. I've got this. I've got that. And so I kind of invite them to do in a similar way of what you're saying is like, well, let's bring in this presence throughout the day in anything that you're doing. And that's step one, at least.
Yeah, and ultimately, again, for me, what health is that presence overtakes more and more and more and more of life.
Hmm.
And so one way to think about it is like, well, what are my practices? The other is like, what is the long-term aim of my life and of our civilization? And I would say it's this deep absorption of everything that is. And and so if it's like that for you now, if this mother or if you or anyone says like, well, this is what it's like for me now, it's going to change. Like if
Yeah.
you start to orient to being present, what you will find is that there's no upper limit of it. You're never going to be satisfied with a little bit of presence. There's always going to be a pull or even a pressure to become more present, to solve problems in your life, to experience greater joys. And so it's going to progress. And so wherever we are, we're going to get the dose that makes sense for us and that we can tolerate. And then tomorrow we'll be available for more.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I've heard you speak on your Instagram, I believe, a little bit about spiritual bypassing. And I've always kind of thought some meditative gurus or practices were a little bit too outside of my body. And that kind of gave me some resistance as well because I already knew I was really disconnected.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I needed more of that grounding first. Can you explain kind of what spiritual bypassing is or why we need both the physical presence plus maybe also this detachment? Like I'm thinking of Joe Dispenza's teachings and like connecting to the quantum and
Yeah.
creating your life in that way.
Well, everybody's going to have a different perspective on it. Of course,
Hmm.
you know that you're asking me, but I really want to honor that there's a really living and active conversation. You could call it a debate, what we actually have to do. And
Hmm.
some people in that debate will really argue that actually focusing on the higher levels is more powerful because it's going to just shift the lower levels. And other people say actually that doesn't work. You have to really get into the trenches of the lower levels. And by that I mean you have to feel your body, you have to feel your emotions, you have to feel what you're holding. And I hold the entirety of that uh, debate as being really valuable. Um, I I started in the trenches, and what I developed is actually a deep love for pain, fear, negativity, and trauma. That's just me. And so now I come at this without any fear of it. Like I come at to this question of really what is best practice without really being afraid of suffering or sadness or any feelings. And I hold this very openly. But what I, but I wouldn't teach that to people. I think the capacity to feel your feelings is really uh, essential. And unless we have that, we're really not able to make an accurate judgment about whether we should be more or less in our bodies or what level we should be uh, coming from, because we are often defending against feelings that we don't want to have, can't handle, or don't want to be with. By being afraid of feeling or being overwhelmed by feeling or being unable to process negatively, we're highly biased in our spiritual perspectives. So, this is what I realized very early on. I'm not in my body. And I said, that's a problem. Like, I can't tell myself that that's okay. I'm going to have to do something about that. And what I learned through the process of coming into my body is that I was holding so much content and energy that I was not aware of. And had I not made the effort of coming down into my body, it would not have been met. There was no magical higher state that was going to transform what I was unconscious of. Transformation only happens in the transformation of things that we are aware of. Things that we are not aware of, things that we're not present to, don't move and change. And so it's very easy, it's understandable that we can stay in very positive states thinking that we're making the right decision by staying in positivity, but we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we hold that's not being touched and transformed. We're ignorant to this unless one of two things happens. One, we actively move towards it, which is what I advocate for. I need to know my whole life and my whole body. I need to move towards the stored energy of the past that I hold actively. I think that's the best way, and I could tell you why. The other is we run into it. We run into it because our relationships have problems. We run into it because we get sick. We run into it because life is showing us that something's not working. It's really hard to run into things, especially when we have high elevated spiritual states, because we think that means something about us. I was in such a positive state, and now there's this negativity, and there's a real habit of wanting to move away from negativity to go towards positivity. So for all of these reasons, try to answer your question, what spiritual bypassing means is generally, in my view, that I'm actually ignorant. I don't know about what the negativity is. I see it from a distance, and I want to move towards goodness, or I want to stay in the goodness without turning my attention to negativity. And the problem with that is that we are actually multi-dimensional beings. We live in many dimensions. We don't just live in the good ones. We live in all of them. And health and well-being is not a function of ascending to a higher dimension or being present in higher dimensions. It's a function of being present in all of them. There's no way to get away from the lower dimensions fundamentally, unless you die, essentially. If you die, perhaps you can get away from it for some time or permanently. But as long as you are alive, you are going to have to attend to and care for what's happening in your body. And so spiritual teachers are really, really guilty, in my opinion, of setting up systems that don't prepare people to really work with their feelings, the developmental phenomenon like anger and will and shame and sadness and dependency and all the things that happen for children. They really have not set people up well to encounter things when they arise. So what they will often say is like, don't worry about it. Just stay in the higher state and somehow it'll all work through. But if you have spent a lot of time looking directly at these things, you would say that's probably not true. And it's probably not even the most efficient way to work through those things. A good example of this is if a child says they're scared. You have a 2-year-old child who says they're scared. Do you tell them, don't worry, everything is part of God's plan? Or do you soothe them? What's a more effective way of bringing safety to a 2-year-old? It's really obvious. You pick them up and you hold them. It's no different than an adult. It's not more effective to go to the higher reality and avoid the lower reality. It's not actually a more effective way of creating transformation. And in my opinion, you're actually just delaying it. And in spiritual cultures, it's an even bigger problem, because if you create a culture that doesn't have the wisdom and intelligence to really honor all of these parts of life that are emotional in nature, that are developmental or ancestral, if it doesn't have the fluency to hold and work with those in a really affirming way, you create a lot of distortions in spiritual cultures. And I think that's why there's so many problems, because they have problems really having the skills and capacity to relate as human beings. And so this is again why I start people at this fundamental level, and then we work up from there. Once we can deal with things like feeling our body and feeling safe and expressing our will and learning how to care for myself and other things we essentially are supposed to teach children, or people are supposed to learn through their childhoods. Once we can do that, then we can move on to all the fancy stuff. Again, many spiritual systems sort of work top down rather than bottom up.
Yeah, and what I've found and seen is that people that come from these camps or do that first will oftentimes feel a lot of shame about not getting the results that are kind of promised to them or they expect. And then now they've got all of this shame and guilt and feeling like, and more confirmation that there's something wrong with me and I'm broken. I went to all these retreats. I did all the meditations. I didn't get, like, I'm not getting any results. I'm worse. And then that's oftentimes where we have to start, is like, okay, we have to go into that belief, those emotions, learn how to feel that. Why did this happen? And kind of unlearn some of those things that they may have been taught in those communities.
Absolutely. And it's my opinion, a spiritual teacher's job is to affirm your process. Like if you walk away from working with a spiritual teacher thinking that you're doing it wrong, there's a serious problem.
Yeah.
Everything about you is right. It has a function and it has a place. And if you are not taught that, the tremendous disservice is being done to you. And in fact, again, what we're looking for is movement. And so if you are thinking that things that are happening in you are wrong, or problems, or even things that you need to like work through so that you can be enlightened, or whatever your story is, it's backwards. Everything in you is looking to be embraced and met, to be present, to be cared for, to have its place in the universe. And having a much more inclusive and celebratory culture is essentially important. Everything about you is welcome. We have the capacity to integrate it. We have the capacity to see where it comes from, and to really understand developmentally what it needs. This is an intelligence that I am embracing for so many reasons, but most of all, I think it works better. I
Yeah.
just fundamentally, I think the outcome is better. Like if you want to have the fanciest experience in the world, I think starting actually by developing good fundamentals or a good base is better.
Mhm.
I mean, you know that in every sport or every other pursuit in life, without fundamentals, like how are you going to achieve excellence? There's nobody, whether you're playing the guitar or playing basketball, that if you don't have the fundamentals, you're not going to be excellent. It's just not possible. And so it's the same in spirituality. And if you develop fundamentals, especially at a body and emotional level, everything that's higher becomes available progressively. And I see this with people because I just finished working with a group today that's looking at light and the process of incarnation. And really, incarnation for me is the bridge between our world and the higher dimensions of consciousness. And what I find is people that a year ago had no skill or ability, and for who this was just esoteric language, if you give them like a progressive skill set where they can presence and access this from their body, they thrive. And everyone in this group, these are just regular people, everyone in this group is having breakthroughs continuously. It's because you've set them up to be successful. Rather than
Mm-hmm.
teaching them the end goal and saying stay in the end, you've created a pathway for that. And again, everything that's prudent and works in our world that's like that. Even the most spiritual systems in the East are like that. The thing is that in the West, we are very spiritually young. Our spiritual systems are very young relative to what has existed and what will exist.
Yeah, yeah. So we've covered the foundations. Let's get in more to consciousness and like maybe what these next steps are, or these like higher dimensional things that you keep referring to. Because I know everyone wants that like amazing aha breakthrough, and you may see this like being advertised and social media and stuff like that. But I find that, even if you have an aha moment, it's still very boring. Like it's very personalized. You don't have this crazy release or this like giant change in your life. Like it happens so subtly. And I think that even some of these like deeper meditative states and you know different levels of consciousness you can access, or different mindset, not mindset, but like headspace shifts, like maybe psilocybin and psychedelics. It's not this big crazy like your life looks totally different after. Does that make sense? Can you kind of go down
Well,
that rabbit hole?
I'm super happy to jump off this. You're teeing it up
Okay.
for me here. Um, okay, so I grew up in this culture too, and
Yeah.
the spiritual culture where people tell their story and they're like, one day I was walking and kabam, I had this
Yeah.
crazy thing and I couldn't walk and I couldn't talk for 2 weeks. And like I will tell you, um, it's not supposed to work like that.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that I would say is you're not supposed to go through your life for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years in a numb or disconnected state. And then one day, through practice or action, have some remarkable breakthrough. That's a very beautiful and exciting story, but it's a sign of actually how broken and traumatized our world is. What's supposed to happen is at every age, you're supposed to be having a developmentally appropriate, awake experience. So when you were in utero, and when you were first born, and when you were a child, and then when you become an adolescent, and then when you become an adult, there is a flowering that is happening. And what people don't know that. So they're like, I want to have this crazy breakthrough. And again, I've had all the crazy fancy breakthroughs that I'm very familiar with this. Um, what we don't see, both before and after, is how it is connected to every other facet of life. This flowering, this maturity process is supposed to happen through the course of our entire lives. It's a continuous process. It's not a moment. It's not a shift. It's supposed to be a continuous development process that actually lives before you were born and after you were born. And so, again, when we think of it in terms of breakthroughs are wonderful. I don't want to diminish it, but it doesn't hold the context of where does this fit in with everything else. So
Hmm.
I sit with people who have breakthroughs, and I sat with somebody the other day who's it's really beautiful. Like they can be in some total other space, and what they don't know is how many other facets of consciousness and reality there are. My teacher had this line. It was something like Adyashanti had this line like, awakening consciousness is like a diamond in that it's faceted. And the beauty and the challenge is that every facet feels complete in and of itself. So, what that means is it's very easy to have an experience and to feel like that's it, that I made it. That's it. And again, we don't know what we don't know. And unless it's part of a map that says, actually, this is your beginning, not your end, then it doesn't really serve us to, again, integrate that and continue to develop it. And so it's very, very important that the teacher that we have, or the system that we has actually a much broader orientation to awakening. This is this is our whole lives. This is the history of our world. It's not about going, having some huge moment and then being done or being finished. For me, that's a kind of a poverty mindset. This is the entire human history. Think about it like all the great things that people do that have contributed to. I've used sports as a metaphor, or science. These are huge bodies of experience, which day after day get built to. If you are an Olympic athlete, you would never think to yourself, today I'm going to run one race and that's going to be it. This moment of training, this is the one day that being an athlete is forever. It's your whole life. It dominates your whole life. You don't finish. There's no end point. It's just all consuming. And this is what spirituality is. So in the early stages, people are having breakthroughs and they're breaking through in a culture that doesn't know what's really happening or how to hold them. And so it feels so differentiated from the rest of life. Like it feels special, it feels elevated. In fact, gurus in general and awakened beings have been like this. They're like special people. Like, wow, they are, it's so amazing. They have this amazing capacity that's so different from what we rest experience. It's like a wealth gap. But again, what's going to happen is that wealth gap is going to break down because progressively there's going to be so much more abundance in consciousness, and breaking through is going to be so much easier. It already is. If you went to a Zen retreat in the 90s, I know this from people who've said the teacher would say to you, if you break through, you're 1 in 100. 99 people are not going to understand what I'm talking about and are going to struggle. And they should actually focus on not suffering about it so much. They should don't strive, don't struggle, just learn to be where you are. One of you is going to have a breakthrough. And so this created a kind of a culture where people felt like, what's wrong with me? I'm not having a breakthrough. And if I do have a breakthrough, I'm special. It's changing so radically. Again, I see people with no previous experience who are not spiritual. I see everyone is breaking through continuously. Every single person that I think I've worked with is having some degree of breakthrough, and if they stay with it. So what happens culturally is when everyone is breaking through, suddenly those breakthrough moments themselves are much less special. They're much less coveted. We feel less poor if we don't have them, and they feel less special when we do. They're ordinary. Again, this is the direction, is what is extraordinary is going to become very ordinary. And that is the healthiest thing, is that we can be very grounded about that we can just learn to get on with it, really. This doesn't mean that when you have your breakthrough that it's not going to feel extraordinary, but there's going to be some bigger process and some bigger holding that you are a part of that's going to hold you. So you don't feel so isolated in both in the negative and the positive, special and also like left out in this. For me, that's a sign of our scarcity, not our abundance. And it's very clear to me that that has changed the experience that you would have now. Like if the thing that people couldn't break through in Zen, like if I were to become a Zen teacher and teach those things, I could take a group of 100 people and 100 people would get it. I really, really believe that. And again, I think that just creates a really different culture and climate for breakthroughs in general.
Do you feel like that's because of our like social media or recent science or just more understanding of how this stuff works or like something collectively at a larger scale?
I'll give you my, yeah, I think there's a lot of factors.
Yeah.
Primarily, I would say it's because of changes in consciousness itself. So
Hmm.
I want everybody to picture a microwave. This is my best model for it. A microwave works. You have some like, I don't know, like a piece of meatloaf or a cold cup of water or something like that. You put it in a microwave and it bombards the whatever the matter or mass with particles, and this heats up the temperature of the earth or of the object. I'm skipping steps. That's a heat up a piece of meatloaf, right? It goes from low energy to a higher energy state because it's being bombarded with particles. That's my model for what's happening on the earth and has been happening for a long time. So um, each of us is the incarnation of light. So when you were born, what it actually means to incarnate is it means that a stream of light passes through from the subtle dimensions. It's kind of a directional flow of light into your body. Light accumulates as you arrive. This is what gives you a point of consciousness. This is why you are here and not somewhere else or everywhere. And so every birth in life is the arrival of light into this world. This world is like in my metaphor, the piece of meatloaf. It is a dense field of energy. It carries a certain density. It carries a certain density mostly because there is a lot of unfelt stored energy here. So the consciousness is a spectrum. So we'll try to start. I'll try to start on the other end of the spectrum. You have a physical body. And everybody takes it for granted that we have a physical body and there's this kind of physical density. But I think what actually makes it perceived like that is stored energy that is in a dense state that actually makes the world appear like that, that actually makes our body appear like that. Again, as people start to practice, they start to feel their body as being less dense. They start to feel it more as a flow of energy. They get access to more subtle experiences and they feel more expanded and less separate and all these beautiful things. But the world as a whole is like this. So from the inside of our world and from the inside of our body, the way that we deal with density, as I've described, as I've emphasized, is by feeling it. It's not going to move and become less dense until we feel it. Again, something I used to say to people all the time is like, by the time you're feeling your sadness or your anger or your shame, it's leaving, it's expanding. Feeling is the movement of energy. So by the time you're feeling something, you are participating in the de-densification, the softening, the opening of our world. So from the inside, for generations, there's this pressure to feel more. Again, your parents don't meet you emotionally, as you described this person earlier. You're left over with this residue. You have to do something about it. So you turn your attention, you feel it, and it moves, and the world becomes dense. So from the inside of the world, people have been doing the work to feel and soften the world progressively. And what's happening is the world is actually getting less dense. The world is getting softer. Conversely, from the outside, this allows more light to pass through. This allows a higher frequency experience of consciousness to really arrive and be here. And so it's these two phenomena. One is that from the higher dimensions, the earth or our collective field is being bombarded with light through the process of incarnation. This is one. And from the inside, there's a participation in the emotional and felt sense or somatic experience of what it's like to be human that's creating a softening. It's the interplay of feeling our body and the bombardment or the arrival of light. And this is essentially what I teach is you can't choose one of those two things. You can't just be light. And conversely, you're not going to be happy if you're just always mucking through your body either. So these two are really married. They're really meant to be together. This is the future of our world, is that increasingly the field is going to get less and less dense, and it's going to allow more light to arrive. As more light arrives and the field gets less dense, what we actually see and feel and what shows up as our reality is going to change really dramatically. I'll give you a really practical example. When I was 12 years old, my father died. This is sort of the primary trauma of my life. And the word trauma didn't even exist in my culture.
Yeah.
Nobody knew what happened to me, and I didn't know what happened to myself. It's not because people were bad. It's because no one could actually see. The reason that no one could see is because life was actually denser 27 years ago than it is now. Same experience happens to somebody that I know now. Their parent says, I'm going to get a somatic therapist for my child because I know that my child actually has this unprocessed grief that's going to stay with them the rest of their life. Why do they know that? Because they can see it, because they can feel it, because they know it in themselves and they can see it in their child. They see it in their child's behavior. So our reality is changing because it's getting less dense and it's allowing for more intelligence to arrive. So to answer your question, this means for any spiritual practitioner, it's getting easier and easier because the thing that you're trying to break through is actually changing as you look at it. It's getting softer and it's becoming more illuminated by light. And that's going to be radically different in 6 months or a year. Like this process is just like when you heat water, like it doesn't stop. It's going to boil, or the meatloaf is going to brown, or whatever you're cooking. So I predict that tomorrow it's going to be even easier because of the efforts of what we are doing here, and also because of the efforts of the universe as a whole.
Wow, that's a really, I've never heard anyone explain it in this way, but I love that metaphor. And it makes sense. Because I mean, I think we can all feel it and see that in the exact way that you've described.
I'll add one other element again,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to like spiritual bypassing. This also means that the pain or the stored energy that is here is going to become increasingly hard to avoid. And you will
Mhm.
find this at a personal level. You'll find this in your relationships. You'll find this in relationship to your ancestors. It's going to put tremendous pressure on the stored pain. The stored pain, again, I said, very much believe wants to release. It wants to be freed, but there is a pressure as the light is actually running into like a dense structure. And that's why, in some ways, when you look at our world, it looks like it's worse. I don't think it is. I think what's happening is you're seeing the darkness, you're seeing the pain, the
Mhm.
negativity more. And I really emphasize that's something to go with rather than fight against. It's to your huge advantage that you can see it because then you can feel it. And then if you can feel it, it will move. If we don't learn how to participate into it, it moves in a much more unpleasant way. Again, that's
Mhm.
especially true globally, where I don't expect there to be a lot of gentle present participation. I expect there to be a lot more crisis and problems that arise from us not dealing with the larger bodies of pain that we really don't have global skills to address at this point.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Then in like my therapy brain, this sounds a lot like shadow work and being able to see and integrate those parts that you really want to avoid and you really don't want other people to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's going and what I'm saying is it's getting harder and harder for that to happen.
Yeah.
My ancestors somehow, when people will say, oh, our ancestors were so tough. And I would say, yeah, that's true. But they also were not able to heal. That's another way to describe it. And so
Hmm.
our problem is that we're not as tough as we used to be. The same strategies that were used are not going to work, and we're going
Yeah.
to be forced into a healing process. And again, that's to our advantage. It's humbling. It's not a lot of fun a lot of the time, but it's really to our long-term benefit.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been such an amazing conversation. I'm looking forward to kind of going deeper into your work. Where can you tell everyone where to find you and your teachings and your website and all of that?
For this podcast, I'm creating a unique URL that I'll put in the show notes that will
Okay.
kind of share with the listener everything that I do that they can access. And that'll say three things. First, you can work with me. As I described, I love working with people. I would love to meet you. And I have all kinds of programs that I teach, and I work one-on-one with people as well. And I also teach free meditations. If you love meditation or if meditation has never worked for you, you're welcome either way. And I sit with people every week. And the third thing is I create guided meditations. I have YouTube content and I am on podcasts. So all of these are links that are available to you if you click the link in the show notes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, anything else you would like to add for someone who may be like really struggling and kind of doesn't know where to turn? Any resources besides your own?
Um, I think the only thing I would say to that person, I won't. Well, first, the way that you find resources is by being open to them and doing what feels resonant to you. So part of the solution is just to feel where you are and acknowledge it and to be open to things changing. With that said, again, I've been in some terrible human places, and radical changes, if not inevitable, certainly possible in this lifetime. I would say it's inevitable. And I want to say that if you are struggling, it's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's actually a sign that you are part of a massive collective awakening that you are feeling. You are part of like the nervous system of the earth. And so it's not a sign at all for me that there's something personally wrong with you. It's a sign that you are participating in something enormous. And that something enormous is going to progress, and it's going to deepen, and we're all along for the ride. So we're in it together. That's my message.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me here today. This has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your questions, and I hope this helps your audience.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you everyone for listening, and I will see you all next time. Thank you, everyone. I am just so thrilled that you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This has been a huge passion project for me and super therapeutic on top of that, helping me to use my voice and connect with other like-minded individuals. So if you're enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe. Please share on social media or with your audience or friends or loved ones. I truly appreciate it. It does take a lot of time and financial costs to run the podcast, and it is not a moneymaker, let me tell you. So if you are enjoying this, I would truly appreciate your support just by sending me a post, a like, and a subscribe. Thank you so much.